Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to Water Tanks. And today I've got a full tank review for you of a brand new Tier 8 Premium Polish heavy tank. It is the 56 TP. This thing has a really awful hull, an okay turret, but a really dependable 122mm main armament and a nice amount of gun depression to go to boot, as well as it also being a fairly fast heavy tank. So it's a bit of a jack of all trades, kind of more of a medium tank than a heavy tank. But today, I'm going to let you know whether this one is one to skip or one to focus your attention on. So let's compare the 56 TP to its Polish brother Tier 8 Premium heavy tank, the 50 TP prototype, and also arguably the best of the Tier 8 Premium heavies, the Skoda T56. The 56 TP has a 122mm, that has 390 alpha damage. Not good, but not terrible for Tier 8 heavies. 50 alpha lower than the 50 TP prototype, which has the same caliber of gun, and significantly worse than the 130 auto-loader that the Skoda T56 has. Now, the problem immediately with the 56 TP is that it only has 1,613 damage per minute. Pretty much T34 levels of damage per minute, almost worst in class at Tier 8 Premium Heavy. This is so bad that while it has 50 less alpha damage than the 50 TP prototype, it actually even has a worse rate of fire at 14.5 seconds reload compared to the 50 TP prototype's 14.2. So all in all, really not very good news so far for the 56 TP, including 252mm of gold pen. It's just not special, but it is definitely better than the Skoda T56 is. But then again, those are armor-piercing rounds, which will have 2 extra degrees of normalization, actually 3 degrees of normalization over the APCR of the 56 TP. I did notice in this tank as well that it does start to run low on ammunition really deep into the battle, a lot like a Skoda T56, as it carries the same amount of ammo as the 50 TP prototype, but remember you're heading for 390 rather than 440. However, look at this gun handling. This is great news for this 122mm. Amazing aim time of 1.9 seconds. Really good gun handling as well, with a turret reverse dispersion being 0.08, meaning you don't really need to use vertical stabilizers on this tank, and amazing accuracy of 0.34, which makes this thing very consistent, even at sniping for a relatively large caliber heavy tank. It's very nice. Add to this 9 degrees of gun depression all around the tank, and this thing is very flexible on a ridgeline and very happy to be engaging its opponents at long range. It should be noted that the 50 TP prototype, while it does have 10 degrees of gun depression, it's only over the side of the vehicle. And over the front, the vehicle has 8 degrees, as I guess it's avoiding this kind of like driver's hatch, which juts out along the front of the tank. However, very good 50 TP prototype players will know this, and they will have an advantage of having 10 degrees compared to the 9 all round that you get on the 56 TP. Now we're going to look at mobility. 40 kilometers an hour fast forwards. It's really good. And when you add to that a really good power to weight ratio of 17.86, this thing doesn't look like it needs a turbo, so it can invest an equipment in a different slot. Or alternatively, I guess you could take the turbo on this thing, and then it's really fast. It's more of a medium tank than a heavy tank with regards to that. When you add to this the fact that the tank weighs 56 tons, that means that this is pretty good for ramming medium tanks especially, and brutal against light tanks. So definitely put that into your repertoire. However, I did notice with this vehicle that the 14 kilometers an hour reverse speed definitely makes it feel quite slouchy for getting back over a ridgeline, worse than the Skoda T56, for example. Passing mention should be made to this tank's good turret traverse of 32 degrees and an okay hull traverse of 38. You can see that it's identical to the 50T prototype with this regard. So far, a bit disappointing with the firepower, really good with the gun handling, really good with the mobility with regards to a heavy. Let's take a look at the armor. And oh yeah, this is where it's pretty bad for the 56 TP. On the front of the tank, you've got 80mm. The lower plate, 70 or 90. It is not going to be ricocheting anything at all. Even the tier 6 tanks are going to be able to go through the front of this thing, albeit if they get a 50% pen roll or they load gold. This is a horrible hull that kind of reminds me of an AMX 5120. That is not a good thing. To add to the vehicle's problems, when the tank side scrapes, it has a big old weak point on the side that its opponents are going to be able to take advantage of. And because of the way that the hull is slanted, the whole of the hull is pennable when you side scrape around a corner. And if you over angle, well, there's no point of side scraping at that point. So this is a horrible tank with regards to its hull armor. It's a massive weakness of the vehicle. It's awful to side scrape, awful when it's exposed. And it's only really when you're using the vehicle's 9 degrees of gun depression and you're not getting shot by heat rounds that it has any hull armor at all. Now, the turret, on the other hand, is pretty good. On the outside of the turret, you see it's fantastic. On the top of the turret, you see it's fantastic with the angling. However, it has a really weak mantlet. To the left and to the right of the gun, all it is 200 millimeters of effective armor. Really easy to be able to hit. As you're going to be seeing later on in the gameplay, it gets hit a lot. People who just randomly shoot at the turret of this thing usually go in. However, it does have enough turret armor that unless you make use of it, then you're really doing this tank a disservice. A passing mention should also be made to the weak point on top of the vehicle. When you're not using your gun depression, it will be exposed. But hopefully you are using your gun depression. Otherwise, this tank is kind of pointless on a ridgeline. So to add to this non-impressive armor, the vehicle has 1,450 hit points, just a little bit less than its companions in this tier, which definitely affects the longevity of this vehicle. The view range, 380 meters, not bad for a tier 8 heavy tank, but definitely not good. This is still requiring you to have all of the field mods of Premium Consumable and Recon Situational Awareness and Brothers in Arms if you want to start to get to a decent view range in this tank, but at least it's a little bit better than the relatively blind Škoda T56. One thing I also noticed with this vehicle, while we're looking at chance to be set on fire, is that this thing gets ammo racked a lot. Because of the awful hull, people shoot you there a lot, and I ended up using a lot of repair kits on my ammo rack and spent quite a lot of the game actually just sitting there with an abysmal reload for only 390 alpha. Crew-wise, a lot of you will be happy to know that this vehicle uses an identical crew to the 60 TP. And so if you are a tier 10 Polish heavy tank lover, then you'll be happy that you get to train them up in your Škoda T56. No, it's not. It's a 56 TP, not a Škoda 56. I'm probably going to end up making that mistake a few times in this replay. Count them in the comments down below. So crew training-wise, your commander is the only high-pressure slot on this tank, as he's the radio operator as well. I would thoroughly recommend getting situational awareness and recon to be able to get your view range up to a decent level on this tank, as you don't want to take coated optics in my opinion. Apart from that, I would thoroughly recommend taking safe stowage on this vehicle, otherwise you are going to get ammo racked a lot. Then it's just as simple as taking Brothers in Arms, getting repairs on the vehicle and focusing on these aspects and adding on the extras. Equipment wise, I like to use my main build of durability, vents and a gun rammer on this tank. This will give you enough hit points on your tracks to keep them on. It will help with your hit points a little bit so you can actually kind of trade a little bit more with that awful damage per minute. But I do have a second build on this vehicle where I drop the durability for a turbo when I want to go really fast. That's 45 kilometers with a 19 power to weight ratio for where you want to maybe contest the hill on mines, although a little bit janky to do so if they have some high tier medium autoloaders. Field mods on the 56 TP are real simple. I start with all-terrain suspension on this vehicle to improve my ground resistances, although this vehicle's mobility is so good that some of you might actually want to consider trying to improve the track health, but I don't think it's worth it. I'd still go for the ground resistances. Next, you're going to take accuracy to improve already awesome accuracy on this tank, and the periscope electric drive to be able to get that little bit of extra view range to avoid having to take coated optics. Anyway, I think that's quite enough lip flapping. Let's go get stuck in on the battlefield. So firstly, I'm going to show you how the 56 TP performs in a really nice matchup. We've got some juicy tier 6s, some tier 7s, and it's basically a duel between me and the Škoda T56 as to who will be the last heavy tank standing. So I'm going to be using durability, vents, and a gun rammer on this vehicle. I want to do everything that I can to improve the rate of fire, because I don't really feel like this tank is like a T-34, which can really expose its turret to pretty much everything and just grind them out slowly but surely. I feel like it has to be a little bit more aggressive, especially with having a little bit less gun depression than something like a T-34 does. And when I think about it, this tank is very similar to a T-34, and I probably should have considered comparing it to the American tank inside the comparison, but I guess I can just do it now. And that is that, yeah, this tank is very similar to a blooming T-34. I wouldn't say that's a good thing. No one thinks about the T-34 as being the tank that everybody wants to play. So I decided to just push up and to go after the Škoda T56. He's fired one, so I thought, well, I'm going to get at least one shot into his tank, but I know he's come so far forwards that I can get a second shot. And luckily for me, my armor does work against little baby tanks like the Skoda T25 on the enemy team. And that's a trade that I am absolutely willing to make into the top tier heavy tank. But gosh, just how bad is this rate of fire? Seriously, boys and girls, it really doesn't feel like this tank should have 390 alpha with this kind of a reload. It does feel like it should have 440 like the 50 TP prototype does. But then again, if Wargaming did give this 440 alpha damage, I think it would be too good because of just how nice it is to snipe and just how good that gun handling is. It does have a free equipment slot, so it will always be using a durability. Whereas something like, oh, I've got to repair to be able to fix the turret and get one into the brass there. Whereas on the 50 TP prototype, I actually end up probably using vertical stabilizers because it has much worse dispersion when you're turning the turret. And also, because it's so slow, on some maps, a lot more maps, I would actually like to use the turbo on a 50 TP prototype. Whereas I don't think this tank needs to use a turbo on the vast majority of situations unless you absolutely gotta go fast. So we managed to get rid of the Borask, we managed to push away the Skoda T56, and I'm thinking about going after the IS there. However, this sneaky little M6 just grazes the dirt near my tank. I fire one back in against their vehicle, unfortunately hitting the tracks and not being able to do any damage to the M6. Now I'm going to come around the corner oh so slowly, and yeah, that is nice gun handling. What you're seeing here is me using regular equipment on this tank. I'm not using bounty equipment, I'm not using bond equipment, this is just regular equipment on this vehicle and no vert stabs. We're going to lose some hit points here to the Skoda T56, but again, I'm not too worried because I'm in a little bit of a pincer, and the Skoda T56 just kind of hangs around a little bit thinking like, what am I going to do in this scenario? Well, you gave me far too long to reload there. You should have put 2 rounds into me. I guess he should have finished off the IS and then just went down the slope to go and get safe. Luckily for me, now with the Skoda T56 dead, I actually get to do what this tank is good at, and that is working a ridgeline and using this rather accurate, quick, responsive 122mm. It's definitely not an exciting gun with only 390 alpha and this awful rate of fire, but it is dependable, and I think a lot of people will enjoy this tank from that perspective of just being a heavy tank that grinds on a ridgeline. Very similar to a T-34 within that regard, to have the awful hull armor that doesn't work unless you're playing against lower tier tanks. I would like to say just we have been pretty much firing on reload this entire game, and it's taken us like 4 minutes to do 3,200 damage. That's because this tank's damage per minute truly is abysmal. What you're seeing here is definitely one of the better games that I had. I think I played about 10 games in this tank. I did have some only 400 damage games. I remember once just getting absolutely obliterated by a bat chat in this vehicle. And it is rather depressing to play a tank like this against something like a dangerous autoloader. They can literally dump out 4 or 5 rounds before you get to fire your second shot if you all fire at the same time. But for every game that you get in a scenario like that, you also get into games where you get these kinds of scenarios. Hopefully not where the KV-85 is aiming up at you with the 122mm, but where you're just controlling the situation, you've got your opponents on a ridge, and you are just able to outgun them and outtrade them in this scenario. I've got higher alpha damage to the T-29, so I'm happy to come around the corner. He actually fires with the 76mm in gold there into my lower plate. That was adorable. And I just want to try and poke to see if I can get this KV-85. But I'm also a little bit worried about the Borask, and you'll see that I actually react fairly quickly to the Borask, get the gun round, drop the hammer on the Borask, and there you go. 5 minutes to do 5,000 damage and pick up 4 kills. This was our ace tanker for the 56 TP. We got a steel wool medal for blocking 1,400 damage. Not bad with the turret up in this tank, and I didn't fire that many gold rounds, so it was 143,000 credits profit, but minus the 65 for some kind of event, the daily missions. Not a bad result at all. Although I would argue that pretty much most of the tier 8 premium heavies would have probably had this kind of a result as well. And I think that the Skoda T56 would have farmed the game up way easier and way faster with the better damage per minute, not needing that gun rammer so you can flex with another module and having that 460 alpha damage double tap. So now we're going to be rolling out on Mannerheim line against equal tiered opponents. And once again, I don't really feel like there's a need for a turbo on this map. I think that any kind of a map where I think the battle is going to be determined within like 100 meters or a couple of 100 meters, like this area, pretty much 90% of the battle is determined in this area. I either win because I destroy my opponents and I'd be able to push through. There's no real need to be able to flank up and go north or be able to go back. So again, a vehicle that can go 40, it's absolutely fine. I usually take a turbo on vehicles that can go about like 30, 35 kilometers an hour because otherwise they just feel a little bit too slow. This tank definitely doesn't need it, and it definitely frees up that kind of track health to be able to keep the vehicle moving, which is very useful when you consider how bad the hull is, because you really don't want to get locked in place for very long in this tank. So it's a bit of a tricky one to be able to kind of like feel the 56 TP, because you see that kind of like gun handling on the move, that base accuracy, not that bad dispersion when moving and when turning the turret. And we're kind of like taking chances against the Carnarvon. And this Carnarvon, they're already pretty much out of the battle in this kind of a situation. And I can use my 9 degrees of gun depression to come over. We bounce a gold round from the Carnarvon. And I can fall back, albeit not the fastest, with a mediocre reverse speed. The Carnarvon's fired. And I just decide I want to get forwards, be able to finish them off. And I might lose a few hit points here. A little bit unfortunate. If I'd had a little bit of a better rate of fire, I wouldn't have had to have taken that damage. But job done. 1,000 damage dealt to the Carnarvon. Now hopefully we can poke up on this ridge and see if we can be able to catch the TVP before they escape. And yes, we can. A very consistent gun. It's like a T-34, but with, I'd say, better aim time. A bit better gun handling. Very comparable accuracy. In fact, off the top of my head, I think the T-34 has 0.34 base accuracy. And if that's the case, then these tanks are identical from an accuracy perspective. The T-34 definitely has the better penetration, though, you know. The T-34 has like 20-25 millimeters better standard pen, and I think about 50 millimeters better gold pen. So if you absolutely, utterly want to just smash through your opponent's armor, or you want to be a little bit lazy inside of a nice matchup, then you probably want to end up using a T-34. You'll see on this tank, I'm actually diving between the shells, thinking about firing an AP there at the Samur SM, but then I realized the gold round would probably be necessary to go through in the majority of the time. Bit of a lazy shot there by me against the Kanonen Jagdpanzer. I think it was a little bit hopeful. And that Kanonen actually fires a second shot so fast compared to me. Really showing you just how bad the damage per minute is on this tank. But looks like we follow it up. I'm pretty sure I would have been able to hit them there. They're on full health, so we'll have to see if they appear again on less than full health. And you know what, I might as well just keep blind firing in this situation. I've got enough ammo and this game's ending very quickly. In the first 3 minutes, it looks like the enemies are down half their hit points. And yeah, it looks like one of my shots hit against that Kanonen Jagdpanzer with the 105mm. And they lose a few more hit points, just hoping they're going to reverse, but they get shut down by the LHMTV called Sir Bottalot. Well, Sir Bottalot, looks like you are sitting in a bush in the center of this map. But you look like you're actually having a pretty prominent role in this battle from that scenario. Alright, this Lanson's leaving, and I have to admit, I do like this gun from this sniping. It's nice. A lot of heavy tanks you feel as if you're just hoping that your shells kind of go towards the center and deal with your opponents. This one is consistent from that perspective. And luckily for me, the Boras takes so much damage that he doesn't even get his second shot into me there. Thank goodness, because otherwise I would be a one-shot in this battle. And just like that, in the first 4 minutes of this battle, we are up to 2,300 damage and 400 assistance, unable to be able to get a little bit extra into the Lanson. But this battle is pretty much over. It's more of a formality. And this is where I really don't like this tank, okay? I don't like this tank when the battle, it transcends into this, well, it's not really more of a transcend, it's more of an ascent into this like depravity at the end of the battle, where it's kind of just trying to feast as much as you possibly can. It just doesn't feel very good in this kind of a moment. Just the damage per minute feels a little bit low, the alpha damage feels a little bit lackluster, and while you do have the mobility to be able to chase the damage, I think there are far more exciting vehicles to play inside the game that have autoloaders or are really fast or have really high damage per minute, and this tank doesn't have any of that, so it does find it a little bit tricky to chase. But again, just such a consistent tank for being able to just grind through our opponents on a ridgeline with enough mobility to still just catch. It's just such a generic tank from that perspective. So again, we are number 1 on damage, number 1 on experience, who make a decent amount of profit for our 4,000 combined. Now, while this is painting a pretty good picture of the 56 TP, I want to show you where it really doesn't feel special. All right, so now we're joining a battle on steps, and we are not in a lovely matchup as you have seen in the previous 2 battles. Now we're dealing with tier 9s, we're dealing with tier 10s. And I want to show you that just this tank doesn't feel like it can trade. It doesn't have alpha damage that outweighs the tier 8, 9, and 10 heavies. It doesn't have the damage per minute to be able to work within their reloads. I just showed you that a fairly innocent tank, like a 50 TP prototype, not only has 50 extra alpha damage, it also has a better rate of fire than this vehicle. And so I found in my gameplay that for every battle that I got into, where I kind of got to work a ridgeline, got to control the engagement, got to like win a fight and then use that to snowball the battle, that I also found myself trying to get myself into awkward situations where it just really frustrated me and didn't work out. So far, so good. We get a shot into the Progetto 46. We're spotting, trying to get some shots in here. Hopefully this one's going to go in. Oh, pretty nice, right? Nice gun handling, nice accuracy, like a heavy tank that can get forwards with a decent top speed and be able to work a ridgeline. Sure. Okay, so unfortunately we don't manage to hit the lever there, but it's just a bit of RNG. And suddenly, in this game, everything is going to start to just fall apart. This tank seems to be so good before the battle lines are actually drawn and the tanks have kind of like taken position and they're squaring off against each other. It's very good at catching people moving into position, but as soon as they have done, it starts to get a little bit frustrating. Okay, first shot into my tank. He just shot me right to the left of the mantlet there, and he rolled for 655. Okay, I gotta keep poking though, right? I gotta keep poking. I mean, even if I do have less alpha damage than him, even if I don't have competitive turret armor, it's not like the E75 was firing gold there either. The E75 is only using their regular rounds, so 246 pen. But as I showed, you only need about 200 to be able to go through this thing's mantlet. Once again, look, hits me right in the center, just next to the gun now. And I have to admit, I'm thinking like, what do I do? These people aren't spamming gold at me, they're just firing at my mantlet. And this is something that people are going to figure out. And I can't poke around the corner either. The E75 literally just demolished me in 3 shots. Now, there's no doubt that E75 got lucky that they high rolled the first shot for like plus 120, and they high rolled the second shot for like, well, actually no, the second shot was just even. But I think I'd be doing all of you a disservice if I just presented this tank with the highlights of those first 2 games. For every game that I had, which I had a good amount of games where everything just went according to the script and according to the plan, and I won my engagement, and then I used that to push a position, work a ridgeline, and snowball. There was another game where not even you would consider overpowered tanks just figured out that they could just shoot this thing in the turret, and then it felt like, what do I have? I don't have hull armor. I don't have turret armor when my opponents know. I don't have DPM to be able to trade, and I don't even really have alpha damage in that situation. So I think that the 56 TP will be a tank that does very well at pushing a medium flank and almost acting as if it's just like a big chunky medium. But it does oh so badly when push comes to shove at trading against heavy tanks. And then for those kind of players who do rely on that and don't have that kind of instinct to push forwards, know which position to go into next, know what ridgeline to work next, I honestly think that those players do way better in a 50 TP prototype, for which its turret armor, it actually works. And its hull armor, especially if you manage to hide that lower plate, actually works in the majority of situations. Next, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, how are you going to get your hands on the 56 TP? Well, it's going to be available as a bonus Battle Pass chapter starting next Friday, and I believe that all of the info is out on Wargaming's website now. The main thing that I'm not certain about is whether it's going to be a reward for just grinding through the bonus Battle Pass, or whether you're going to have to purchase the premium part of the Battle Pass to be able to get the tank, like was the case with the T832. Now, if you can just grind through and not have to pay the 3,500 gold and get this tank, I think it's a good pick. It's a pretty nice tank to be able to get for free. However, if you have to grind and spend 3,000 to 5,000 gold, I'm probably not sure that this thing is worth it. So to conclude, the 56 TP has me all kinds of confused. In some ways, this tank feels really nice with this 122mm, which is very dependable, a nice top speed of 40 kilometers an hour, and 9 degrees of gun depression, which allows you to work a ridgeline. But in other ways, like its penetration, its raw rate of fire, its horrible hull armor, and the way that its turret armor falls apart as soon as its opponents know where to shoot it, it just feels as if it's more awkward than it is fun to play. And while I don't think this thing is going to end up being a terrible tier 8 premium tank, and I'm sure that a few people actually end up really enjoying its consistency and its ability to go and push a flank and to fight very proficiently against mediums, I can't imagine that this is going to be a meta pick, especially when there are other premium heavies in the game that have higher alpha damage with autoloaders, with better hull armor, with arguably better turret armor as well. And I think that you could even just go and play a medium tank, honestly. You could go and play an Iron Arnie, or you could go play a 122 TM, and you kind of have the playstyle of this vehicle, at least with regards to its aggression and its gun depression, without so many of the drawbacks, with all of the advantages of being a medium tank, with having camo rating so you can actually hide in bushy positions. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for me today. Really hope you enjoyed this full tank review and it was useful for you if you're making a decision about whether you want this tank or not. If it was, give the video a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments what you think about the 56 TP. Do you think it looks awful or do you think it looks incredible? And if you're watching this video as it's released on Friday, I'm going live on Twitch with brand new tokens so that you can get your T14 heavy tank completely for free over the next couple of months. So come say hi on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby. Get yourself some fat loot and hopefully see a few fat games. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic and hopefully I'll see you soon.